In the wild highlands and war-torn plains of Central Asia lie tantalizing traces of the ancient world. Here, 2,300 years ago, Alexander the Great became the first European to rule the East. In an epic campaign, the ancient Greeks crushed the Persian Empire. It was a turning point in human history. Along the banks of the mighty Oxus River, Alexander discovered a highly developed Eastern civilization. My name is David Adams. I'm a photojournalist, and I want to explore the footprints of this ancient world, today almost entirely erased. This is my quest for Alexander's lost world. Far Eastern Afghanistan. One of the most remote and extreme landscapes on Earth. When Alexander marched east along age-old mountain passes, he was securing his route to India. He ventured into a realm of lost cities and forgotten tribes. For the final stretch of my journey, I want to trek up to the Oxus headwaters to meet the people that call themselves the children of Alexander. Here lies the trail of great European explorers that came to find the source of the River Oxus.
Well, this is it, the source of the Oxus. It's absolutely bone-chilling. But the source really isn't the issue. What the issue is the amazing civilizations that this river has given birth to.
There's a connection between this ancient river and the story of our earliest beginnings. The source of civilization. In a series of historic victories, over more than 4 years of battle, Alexander defeated his Persian enemy. Now his empire stretched from Greece in the west to the kingdom of Bactria in the east. All that stood in his way were the mountain passes that led to the ultimate prize, India. These inhospitable and remote ranges are the same today as they were in Alexander's time. So far, we've driven all the way from the Oxus River Valley. We're now venturing into the Wakhan Corridor, a 300-kilometer-long strip of immense peaks, the meeting place of the Pamir and Hindu Kush Mountains, bordered by Tajikistan to the north and Pakistan to the south. Surviving Greek records reveal little about Alexander's route through the maze of ancient highways that follow these mountain valleys. But what's certain is back then, Alexander and his army had nothing like our four-wheel drives.
I've only ever seen Bactrian camels in the zoo, so to see them here right on the Oxus is just incredible. They're just left out here to roam, and then obviously when they're needed, they're used as pack animals and they're taken up higher into the Pamir. But it's just so exciting.
Alexander was inspired to campaign from Bactria to India by the story of one of his heroes, the god Dionysus. This ancient mosaic shows the triumphant return of Dionysus from India. Alexander believed that to do the same would make him immortal. We're heading for a village called Sarhad, the age-old terminus for Central Asian caravans that brought people, ideas and goods between East and West.
Well, as my dear old dad used to say, when you come to the end, stop. This is as far as the road goes. This is Sarhad. From now on, we walk.
And there's something very special about Sarhad. It's the home of the Waki, and they've lived here almost forever. They believe they are the living descendants of Alexander himself. It's been over 2,300 years since the Greeks marched through these highlands. But today, the legend of Alexander still lives large. Since the earliest of times, the origin of the Waki has been a mystery. Subsistence farmers, they cultivate crops in the spring and move up the valley to higher pasture in the summer. It's said that the blood of Alexander the Great runs through their veins.
You know, I have a feeling that these guys actually haven't had their photo taken before, or actually seen the image on a camera.
If you look at the children's faces, it's easy to see where the idea came from. They have distinctly different features to the Afghans we've met so far in the lowlands. And some have striking blue-green coloured eyes. But did Alexander and his soldiers father children in these villages? I'd love it to be true, but it seems no more than a romantic idea. One of Alexander's biographers, Curtius, tells us that in 327 BC, Alexander met a mountain tribe like the Waki in a neighbouring valley. Just as his army was about to lay siege to their small town, Alexander stopped his attack and declared the community to be the children of his hero, the god Dionysus. Mountain tribes like the Waki were already here when the Greeks arrived. So if not the children of Alexander, who are the Waki descended from? Their cultural traditions and language suggest their lineage stretches back long before the time of the Greeks. New genome research has revealed that their village Sarhad sits upon a major route in man's evolutionary path. 30,000 years ago, a primordial people lived here. As the climate changed over thousands of years, their descendants were forced to move down to warmer climes in Europe and Asia. By 6000 BC, they'd settled along the fertile river system of the Oxus. Others reached the Indus Valley in India. Their belief systems and technology spread. And by 2000 BC, the first great river cities dominated the Bronze Age world, setting the course of history. I'm convinced tribes like the Waki are the descendants of the first settlers in these high pastures. To dig deeper into their story, I want to find out exactly where the River Oxus begins. The Waki are going to guide me higher up into the mountains to explore their ancient homeland and search for the source of the Oxus. It's going to take a month to get up and back. There are no roads, no places to resupply. We have to carry everything in with us.
Well, Rudyard Kipling famously wrote that east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. But here in Sarhad, they actually do meet, because the great caravans used to come here. Those coming over from China used to unload here, and those then taking it to the Oxus and Balk and all the way to Europe used to take the loads on. There would have been hundreds of caravans just like this, heading off into the Pamirs and going the other way. So what we're doing is actually a time-honoured tradition of packing up animals and heading into the wilderness. Thank you.
It's summer, but Alexander and his 22,000 men scaled the passes into India in the depths of winter. This was a dangerous gamble. In these vicious conditions, there'd be much less chance of being ambushed by hostile hill tribes. But in temperatures as low as -40, Alexander's army would have paid a heavy price. And they didn't have anything like the kit we're using.
But you're probably wondering why one Ferengi has got so many horses and men. We've actually got 16 horses, 16 handlers, 4 porters, and then there's our party of 5. But travelling like this is exponential. When you have things like we do, generators, medical kits, you need more and more horses. Therefore, you need more and more men. So the caravan gets longer and longer. Hence, we've got a lot of horses and men.
Our caravan is nothing compared to Alexander's vast baggage trains. Keeping his regiment supplied and moving forward in this terrain was an extraordinary feat. He was unbeaten in battle. But it was the frontier tribesmen who now threatened to bring an end to his winning streak. Alexander's army survived the precipitous valleys for 6 bleak and grueling months. Without control of these passes, Alexander could never secure his burgeoning empire. This was a strategic region worth fighting for, and even dying for. It's time to set up camp for the night. But no tents for the Waki. Unlike me, they're hardened to the elements. Their great-grandfathers very likely accompanied an ambitious Danish explorer who came here just over 100 years ago in 1898. His name was Ole Olafsson, and he was tracking the elusive source of the River Oxus. Olafsson was convinced that its headwaters had given rise to the Waki's ancient ancestors. We're heading up towards 4,000 metres. And for me, it's a step-by-step existence.
Well, I must say that I'd half expected to actually be following the river, and I hadn't expected so many hills like this. They call this the Snake as it winds up, and it definitely is a good climb.
The Waki know every twist and turn. Each year, they bring their sheep to graze in these highlands and trade with nomadic tribes. Nowadays, it's slim pickings, but it hasn't always been this way. After a couple of days of arduous climbing, we make it to the high plains of Langar. In the time of the Waki's ancient ancestors, the climate here was very different. Scientists suggest it was as much as 5 degrees warmer. In these ranges, ancient terraced fields and irrigation canals have been found. Judged to be thousands of years old, it's evidence of sustained cultivation. Olafsson believed that people lived here even before the development of the region's oldest religion, Zoroastrianism. He got some of his ideas from the Avesta, the Zoroastrian holy book. It describes a mythical mountain called Mount Hara and a mighty river that ran beside it. Trekking through here, Olafsson saw the parallels with the Pamir Mountains and the Oxus River Plains. He was in no doubt that this was what the Zoroastrians called the Garden of our First Parents, meaning the Garden of Eden. Seeing this amazing land for the first time, I can't help but think he was onto something. As we climb higher, it's like entering a completely different realm. The Bami Dunya, the roof of the world. There are a series of graves here, but no one knows how old they are.
Doesn't seem like they're Muslim graves. It's hard to tell if the bodies were facing Mecca or not because they've been disturbed. But really, they seem to be a lot older. This place is absolutely intriguing. There are a number of things that happened here. The graves, and possibly the shrine, are from one period, maybe Chinese. These flags are Islamic. The horns actually hark back to a much earlier period when people worshipped goats or horned animals.
It's not surprising that memorials like these reveal a mix of religious influences. This seems like a remote, wild corner of Afghanistan. But for thousands of years, it was an ancient highway. In 327 BC, when Alexander crossed these mountains, this valley would have been a busy thoroughfare full of traders and caravans. They were heading to and from the cities of Bactria in the Oxus lowlands. These were prosperous centres. with elaborate Zoroastrian temples. Well established in the Bronze Age and still thriving when the Greeks arrived. The network of trade routes stretched right across Bactria. As well as people and technology, it carried goods like gold, spices and opium to the cities of the Indus Valley in India, to Babylon in Mesopotamia, to Thebes in Egypt, and all the way to Athens in Greece. By using these vital communication links, the Greeks began to build their empire in the east. Today, not many goods or travellers come through these passes. The trade in opium, though, is booming. The majority of the world's opium traffic comes from Afghanistan. It's smuggled into Tajikistan and then on to the west. But a good deal stays in these mountains. These locals trade over 100 of their sheep every year to feed their opium addiction. Late in the afternoon, we make it into Jazgoz, an encampment belonging to the nomadic Kyrgyz that have made the roof of the world their home. This is as far as the Waki can take us.
Payday, same the world over.
Their earnings are worked out by how heavy the loads were and how many hours are spent away from home. And everyone comes up with his own grand total. Our guide Shafi has to sort it all out and distribute our tips without offending anybody. Eventually, happy with their lot, the Waki head for home. And I start to get acquainted with my new hosts. The family of local tribal leader Haji Hosma. The Kyrgyz migrated along trade routes from the north only 200 years ago, long after the original settlers left these high pastures. Though they live in a very similar way, in felt yurts, with a few modern tweaks. It's July, but a dusting of snow on the mountains is a chilling reminder that the long months of winter are not far away. This is one of the toughest climates on Earth. These Kyrgyz families survive by herding and breeding yaks and goats. There's a limited choice of food up here. So tonight, I'm cooking dinner.
So what I'm trying to make, hopefully, is spaghetti pescatore, which, if my memory serves me, is spaghetti with fish, because we have some lovely fresh tuna. I don't know if it's going to be quite the same colour in the can. Very tasty onions and a few herbs and things. So we'll see how we go.
I'm betting that this is the first tuna ever to make it up here. But I'm not so sure what the locals think of my signature dish. When Alexander and his troops journeyed through mountain passes in winter, food was extremely scarce. The streams and grazing ground for their pack animals and horses were frozen. Facing starvation and hypothermia, they fended off hit-and-run assaults by hostile local tribes. To the Greeks, the craggy strongholds seemed impenetrable. The peaks too sheer for their catapults. Alexander's archers scaled the cliffsides and were repelled time and time again. Twice wounded just a valley or two south of here, it was the battles Alexander fought with the hardy men of these mountains that were the toughest of all. I've been given the chance to find out just how demanding doing battle at these extreme altitudes must have been. Today, the Kyrgyz are gathering to play a traditional war game called Bushkazi. And I've been invited to take part.
This is amazing. There's must be 50, 60 horsemen of just coming in from all different parts of the valley.
They've come across the passes from Tajikistan and Pakistan to celebrate a marriage. And no Kyrgyz wedding is complete without a wild bout of Bushkazi. It's game on. This is as close as I will ever get to taking part in an ancient battle. And on one of the highest playing fields in the world, it's hard for me to breathe up here, let alone ride. We're in a frenzied tug of war with the carcass of a goat. Riders charge as fast as they can around a peg and back to the centre of the pitch. I finally get the hang of it. It's a high adrenaline game. And the altitude takes the fight out of me. As I retire exhausted, Haji gives me the champion's coat.
Well, I think I've been given some great honour by having this, but I certainly haven't earned it, considering the way that these guys ride. One good game was about all I had in me. At the moment, these guys can play forever. It's incredible the stamina these guys have got. And the horses, the power. It's just fantastic. You would never think that you could get this much out of a horse at 4,200 metres. Oh, wow.
These Kyrgyz horses give me an idea of just what Alexander's cavalry endured. After months of battle, Alexander eventually subdued the mountain tribes. He had seized tenuous control of some of the most ancient human highways on Earth. And the prize still lay ahead. Now Alexander marched to the plains of India. Next morning, it's time for us to move on. I want to find the source of the Oxus, the cradle of civilization in Central Asia. To find the river's source, I have to find its longest tributary. Haji has been riding these passes for 40 years. He knows every stream and valley.
Are they equal, or is this river smaller?
When Olafsson came here, he followed a stream called the Bergut.
It's another day. But in here is the
It's over 30 kilometers east of here, towards the border with China. Over 1,200 years ago, these borderlands were part of the Tibetan Empire. But then, the Chinese began to encroach on their territory.
And this little shrine is a terrific example. The locals round here consider this an Islamic site. So the story goes, a holy man once passed this way and they erected this temple in his honor. But we know differently, because when the Chinese had defeated the Tibetans, they came back through here and they noted that this temple was already here. Now that was 747, so that means this is very old, probably Buddhist. It just shows you how the stories change over time.
There's so little recorded history about these isolated ranges, it's hard to separate the hearsay and the folklore from the facts. Trying to work out the names of geographical features, like valleys, tributaries and rivers, is even harder. Olafsson was meticulous in his search. He measured the length and flow of the Bergut and declared it to be the source. But he missed a vital link. The Bergut runs down from the mountains, joins the Wakhan River, and flows into the Oxus. Olafsson noted another river east of the Bergut, and it flowed into Lake Chakmatine. But he didn't explore it. It's called the River Chalab today, and it's far more important than Olafsson realized. One of its branches flows into the lake, then runs in a great arc to the north and eventually joins the Oxus. Remarkably, these rivers all come from the same source, the Chalab.
Well, this is the beautiful Lake Chakmatine. Now, the local Kyrgyz also call it Chalab Lake, the same as the river. And it's a real contender as the source of the Oxus, because the water comes way up on the Tajik border, down the Chalab, into the lake, and then through a series of lakes, it forms the Aksu River, which then bends right around, becomes the Maghreb River, and then flows into the Oxus. So the method in our madness in trekking along here is to go and measure the water coming out at the end of the lake, because now in August is the biggest time of melt off the glaciers. So it's ideal to see the real flow.
I'm measuring the outflow from the lake to determine whether it's strong enough to be the source of the Oxus.
Onto the land. No, don't go. Come out of the water.
I know this looks pretty basic, but actually it's quite scientific.
Go back to the end. Go back. Okay.
Now, in case you're wondering what I'm trying to achieve here, I'm trying to measure the velocity of this river. And I'm going to drop this bottle and then time how long it takes to cover the distance. And that will give me the velocity of the river. And hopefully I'm faster than the bottle. So here we go. Mad dogs and Englishmen, I think they say. Mad dogs and Australians. Okay. So that took 48.37 seconds. I'm sure these guys think I'm absolutely stark raving mad doing this, but there is a reason. Now, what I'm doing here is measuring the width of the flow, and then I'll measure with these marks, which are a foot each, of how deep this is.
It's flowing at a heck of a rate.
Foot.
Now we need to know its length. By my calculations, it's 442 kilometres from the source of Olofsson's Bergot to the confluence with the Oxus. But the Chalep is 534 kilometres from its source to the confluence. It seems that Olofsson got it wrong. It's not the Bergot, but this river, the Chalep, that is the longest. The problem is, in 1911, an earthquake measuring 8 or 9 on the Richter scale caused a landslide that completely dammed its route. That means the Chalep was the source of the Oxus in ancient times. But today, there has to be a new source. There's only one alternative. It flows down from the icy peaks of the Little Pamir, and it's called the Wajir River.
Well, I think I've got my figures right, but they actually don't mean much until we get up into the Wajir and actually compare the two systems. And that's 4 days away.
We're heading along the ancient passes that lead east towards China. This is one of the last great wildernesses in the world. Nothing has changed in this breathtaking landscape for thousands of years. It has remained a strategic buffer zone since the time of Alexander. Down through the centuries, successive armies have passed through these borderlands. And there are signs here of the most recent incursion. This line of barbed wire is all that remains of the secret missile base built by the Soviet Union soon after they invaded Afghanistan in 1979. Soviet interest in controlling Central Asian territory and trade routes had been building for a century or more. And no one was more aware of the Soviet threat in these parts than celebrated British explorer George Curzon. A politician and an aristocrat, he too believed the Oxus was a great parent stream of humanity. Curzon trekked to the Wajir River Valley in 1894 and concluded it was the source. But he was wrong. It's not as long as the Chalep though it may be the longest tributary still flowing today. In their winter coat, yaks are like badly designed carpets.
These really are the most marvellous animals. This is the hornless variety of yak, and I'm just wondering if you can see the sort of family resemblance here. What do you think? You think they're from the same family? Hello, cuz. Good boy.
Since we set off from Sarhad to find the source of the Oxus, we've been trekking for more than 2 weeks. Under the rain and sleet, the temperature's dropping. The going is getting tough, and we've had to leave the rest of the caravan behind in the valley. We make our final camp before the push up towards 5,000 meters and the end of the Wajir River Valley. We're now just 2 kilometers away from the border with China. There's not a soul to be seen. But there is a haven in this freezing terrain.
It's actually quite roomy in here. The name of this place is Koshtrabat, which means 2 houses. These are very old caravanserais. The caravans used to come down from China all the way through to Afghanistan in the middle of winter, and they needed a place to stay.
It's clear that in ancient times, these rudimentary shelters were built for travelers along this inhospitable ancient valley. Finally, our destination is within reach. The source of the Wajir flows from somewhere up ahead beneath a massive glacier.
Oh, fantastic. Isn't it amazing? Thank you. Oh. Well, this is it. There's actually 2 caves. You can see it goes a bit further, but there's also another one over there. And what we're going to have to do is get into the river and test the water, see how fast it's flowing and how much water's coming out. But just to give you an idea how high we are here, if you're living at sea level and you walk outside and look straight up 4.5 kilometers, that's where we're standing. Now, coming out of this cave, there's an absolute full blast of cold air. It's absolutely bone chilling. Ready, Shafi, and go.
The flow is about as strong as the Chalep. Now, I want to work out its length. It's 459 kilometers from the ice cave back to the confluence with the Oxus. It is the longest tributary still flowing, which makes the Wajir the true source today. We began our epic trek at Sarhad. and followed the Oxus up to Lake Chakmatine, then up into the glacial valley of the Wajir. This magnificent river begins at the roof of the world. It flows for over 2,500 kilometers. I followed in the footsteps of some of the most formidable explorers in history to solve the mystery of this ancient waterway.
After all this time and all this debate, the source really isn't the issue. What the issue is the amazing civilizations that this river has given birth to.
For thousands of years, the Oxus has carried people and ideas through Central Asia and onwards to both the east and the west. I feel I've come a step closer to understanding Alexander's grueling campaign through these mountain passes. Over 2,300 years ago, he laid claim to the pathways that lead back to our earliest beginnings. This matchless landscape is all but deserted today. What remains are the mountain refuges and memorials to the lives claimed along the way. It's the end of my 6-month journey. I began as Alexander did in Greece, and I've traveled almost 7,000 kilometers to the eastern borders of Afghanistan. Alexander would fail in his final conquest. Unlike the victorious god Dionysus, the vastness of India defeated him. Over time, much of the world he conquered has been lost to climate change and war. But today, intriguing traces of ruined fortresses and age-old temples still survive. Evidence of the spectacular cities and trading posts that flourished along the River Oxus in the Bronze Age. Alexander's achievements made him a legend. But his greatest legacy is his discovery of the extraordinary civilization that once thrived in this forsaken land. It formed a decisive part of our history and shaped the world we know today.